I remember Gex 64 fondly, but I haven't played the game since that one time I rented it from Blockbuster as a kid. Recently, I revisited the Gecko, so let's see how it holds up 20 years later, and if it's worth checking out nowadays.
It's tail time.
If you're not familiar with Gex, that's not too surprising. In the 90s and early 2000s, we had a ton of mascots. Every company wanted their own Mario or Sonic. The 64 and PS1 era spawned some fantastic mascots like Banjo-Kazooie, Crash Bandicoot, or Spyro the Dragon. Unfortunately, not every mascot stood up to the test of time, so some of the less popular ones like Gex or Glover have been forgotten. Gex was brought to us by the visionaries over at Crystal Dynamics. Gex 64 is the second out of what would be 3 mainline games. The first Gex was a 2D platformer, and Gex 64 was their attempt at bringing Gex to the 3rd dimension. I should note Gex 64 is a port of Gex Enter the Gecko, which was originally released on PS1. I have not played the PS1 version, but from my understanding, the N64 version is the inferior version. It has less levels and less voice lines, but the graphics are slightly improved. With that being said, let's hear about Gex. Gex doesn't have any in-game story from what I could tell, but to sum it up briefly, Gex's enemy Rez has started to take over the media dimension. Gex is kidnapped by some agents and forced to go save the world again. That's the long and short of it, but there is a 3-page in-depth lore breakdown in the instruction manual. So if you want a more detailed version of this, feel free to go check it out. Now that we know the story of Gex, let's talk about the game. As soon as you hit New Game, you're immediately thrown in this hub world. Think something like Mario 64 or Spyro, but much less interesting. Running around as Gex feels okay. It doesn't feel as great as Mario's movement, but it's far from terrible. Gex doesn't have too many moves at his disposal. He can run and jump. If you jump again right as you hit the ground, Gex will bounce off his tail to get some additional height and distance. The Z button makes Gex crouch, which is pretty useless on its own, but it turns into a flying kick if you run and jump while crouching. This can get you some extra distance, and it can also hurt enemies. Speaking of jumping, if you try and jump a gap and you're close but don't quite make it, Gex can do a ledge grab with his tongue, which pulls you up on the ledge. This definitely came in handy on some tricky platforming sections. Other than jumping, the B button causes Gex to do a spin and hit enemies with his tail, just like Crash Bandicoot. Finally, the R button makes Gex shoot his tongue out. This is only useful for eating flies, which can power you up or restore health. And every now and then, you'll come across some walls that Gex can climb up using his lizard powers. All in all, there isn't a ton of depth to his moveset. As you run around this hub world, you'll find these giant TV screens, which are the various levels throughout the game. The level names are all random 90s pop culture references like Honey, I Shrunk the Gecko and The Umpire Strikes Out. Step on the green button and you'll be transported to the media dimension. Each level will have a few different missions that you can do to earn red remotes, which are the Gex equivalent to stars or jiggies. The mission you choose doesn't seem to alter the level much. From what I can tell, this basically just changes which hint you get shown during the beginning fly-through. Inside the levels, the main goal is to make it past the enemies and platforming sections to find the red remote that was shown to you. Each level also has some themed collectibles, like carrots in a cartoon-themed world or skulls in a horror-themed world. These can be used to collect silver remotes, which I'll talk about later. As you collect red remotes, you'll unlock more of the hub world, which basically just lets you have access to more levels. Occasionally, there will be boss battles, which are nothing to write home about. These boss battles basically boil down to dodging their attacks and hitting them with your tail when the time is right. There's not a whole lot you can do to make these more interesting, and this isn't really a flaw of Gex 64. It seems pretty run-of-the-mill for 3D platformers of the time. This game has 14 main levels and 4 bosses. The levels are spread across a couple different themes, such as cartoon, horror, prehistoric, and others. Once you get 33 red remotes, you're able to unlock the 4th boss fight, which is a final showdown against Rez. And once you beat Rez, the game is complete. Outside of these main levels and bosses, there are also 9 bonus levels that you can unlock by collecting the silver remotes. There are silver remotes hidden in each level, and you also get one if you collect enough of the carrots, skulls, whatever, in each level. I didn't unlock all of these bonus levels in my playthrough, but the levels I did were all very small, with the sole objective of collecting enough tokens before the time ran out. For example, there was an Indiana Jones themed one where you need to collect 50 gems within 2 minutes. When you beat the bonus levels, you get gold remotes, which unlock secret levels. There are 3 secret levels in this game, but during my playthrough, I didn't do enough bonus levels to unlock any. It sounds like these are about the length of a regular level, so there's a fair bit of extra content here for completionists. Let's talk about what I enjoyed while playing through Gex. First off, Gex is pretty cool as a mascot. He has a lot of charm to him, and he has some legendary quips. If you watch Donkey or Scott the Woz, I'm sure you've heard some of them, such as,
This is like a luau at Mel Blanc's house.
I think that Conker is really the only other N64 character who talks as much as Gex. Outside of Gex himself, I can appreciate the variety of worlds that are presented to us. It's really easy for platformers of the time to stick to a few safe themes, such as an easy starter world, an ice world, a fire world, and so on. Gex avoids some of the more typical themes and goes for some lesser seen themes such as space, futuristic, and prehistoric. I gotta be honest though, I really didn't enjoy my playthrough of Gex that much. My biggest gripe about the game is how forgetful everything is. This game has no standout levels, no memorable music, and most of the bosses were very bland. I played through this a few months ago and already forgot one of the bosses existed. The thing I will remember about this game is not the gameplay, not the music, but the Gecko, Gex. Outside of being very forgetful, some of the level design is really not that great. Most of the levels are very linear, while you'll reach a metaphorical fork in the road, and each path will take you to a different remote. But there is this one space level that I had to play through a handful of times to find this certain red remote. I replayed this level over and over, taking every path imaginable. Most of these paths wound up in dead ends, which is really annoying, but not the end of the world. But after playing through this level a few times, I had to resort to reading a walkthrough to figure out where to go. The guide started with this sentence: "From the start, turn around." In a game that is 99% linear, this is the only level where there's stuff behind the starting point. In the first few levels, I did look behind me at the start and found nothing, so at this point in the game, I was trained to go forward from the start. Call it a skill issue, but I'll call it bad level design. This really rubbed me the wrong way, and I'm still salty about how many times I had to replay that level. Speaking of skill issues, there were plenty of jumps in this game that were incredibly hard, even as a gamer who's been playing platformers for 20 plus years. Most of these jumps require you to do Gex's tail bounce with the running start to be able to clear them. If you did it too early, you wouldn't get enough distance, and if you did it too late, you'd be going straight off the edge. This isn't the biggest deal in the world, but this game really could have benefited from some coyote time where you're able to jump or bounce if you're a few pixels past the ledge. I don't know how kids of the time were expected to beat these parts, but maybe that extended their playtime. Lastly, and one of the biggest shames about the game is Gex himself. The best part of this game is Gex and his personality. Unfortunately, 90% of his personality is very dated pop culture references. And now in the year 2023, most of these voice lines are extremely irrelevant, which is okay, it's fine. But even more so, a lot of them had me scratching my head because I didn't even get the reference. I turned 30 this year, and I'll always be too young to get some of these references. If I don't get some of these references, some of the younger gamers out there who might try Gex with the remake this year, they definitely won't get the references. As a side note, I also found it very hard to make out what Gex was saying for some of the lines. This could be a flaw of the N64 version due to memory constraints, so I'm wondering if it's better on the PS1 version, but there were multiple instances where I had to hear the line a few different times to finally make out what Gex was trying to say. With all that out there, do I think you should play Gex in 2023? No, not really. Outside of the memes from all the voice lines, Gex doesn't really stand up against the other classic 3D platformers of its time. The game is not bad, but your time could be better spent elsewhere. I didn't really enjoy my time playing the game, and I'm sure a year from now I will all have but forgotten most of the game. It's unfortunate because I think Gex is a cool character, but unfortunately Gex 64 does not stand up to the test of time. In the future, I do want to check out Gex 1 and Gex 3, and I hope I will enjoy one of those two, and I definitely will enjoy seeing the Gecko again. Until then, tail time is over.
It's tail time.
I'd like to thank you all for watching. If you enjoyed the video, please like, subscribe, and leave a comment. It helps out a lot. I'm just getting started on long videos here on YouTube, so let me know what you want to see. I'm planning on reviewing other Nintendo 64 and PS1 era games, and I also want to check out some indie games. I haven't streamed much recently, but I will be streaming playthroughs of other Nintendo 64 games, and you can check me out on TikTok, Twitter, and YouTube Shorts, where I do post regularly. Until then, let's keep gaming, and I'll catch you in the next one.